Multiple huge New York Met injury updates. This has serious implications. As you see on your screen, Max Kranick and Tylor Megill are both injured. They're both on the 15-day IL. So that's bad news. But we got some good news on the fronts of Mark Vientos and Brooks Raley. Both of them have began rehab assignments in AAA and Low A respectively, coming back from their injuries. So hopefully they won't take too long to rejoin the MLB roster that is really starting to dwindle, especially on the starting pitching staff due to injury. And these four moves are not the only four that we're going over today. We have plenty more to discuss as the Met transaction list has looked really long over the past couple of days and will get even bigger with a critical transaction that will transpire today in order for the Mets to have a starting pitcher tonight on Friday Night Baseball on Apple TV as the Mets start a critical set against the Philadelphia Phillies. 3 games on national television, Friday night on Apple TV, Saturday night on Fox, and Sunday Night Baseball on ESPN. We take on the Phillies, both of which are now 45-30. We're tied with the Phillies for first place in the National League East due to our longest losing streak of the season at 6 games here in 2025. It's time to snap it, and it'll start on Friday night. But before we can do that, we have a lot of transactions and a lot of roster moves and a lot of injury updates to go over, and we'll do that only on Mets Digest. I'm your host today, Mike Duda. I'll take you through it, but you know me, I'm a stats guy. I like to start off with some statistics first. And today's stat is that 72.1% of you that watch these videos are not subscribed. So please do me a favor, do us a favor here on Mets Digest, and hit that free subscribe button. That way we can bring content to you about the amazing. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into this. And look, this is a really long transaction list, as you can see, and this is only over the past couple of days, but I'll take you through each and every single one of these moves. So we'll start at the bottom of your screen. Back on June 17th, New York Mets recalled right-handed pitcher Justin Garza from the Syracuse Mets. And usually when a guy like Garza is called back to the MLB roster, that only means that there is an injury. And unfortunately, 3 up from that, you can see said injury. On the 17th, the New York Mets placed right-handed pitcher Tylor Megill on the 15-day injured list, retroactive to June 15th, 2025, with a right elbow sprain. Now, the good news about being retroactive to the 15th is because he's on the 15-day IL, he can come back relatively quickly. He can actually come back by the end of the month, by June 30th. However, that is just simply not going to happen, as we'll begin hearing from the experts, starting with Anthony Giacomo of MLB.com. He says, quote, "The Mets on Tuesday placed right-hander Tylor Megill on the 15-day injured list due to a right elbow sprain. An MRI revealed no structural damage from Megill, only a significant amount of inflammation in the joint. But even at a best-case scenario, manager Carlos Mendoza said Megill will miss 4 to 5 weeks. So unfortunate news for Megill. He'll be out for a month plus. But he's thinking positively because he thinks that this is the best case scenario for an elbow injury. He says, quote, "Considering all things elbow related, I would say this is probably the best outcome that could happen from something like this. I'm just going to take time, get healthy, and reassess here in a week and a half." So around the June 25th, maybe 26th, 27th mark, Tylor Megill is going to reassess. He's going to see where the inflammation is at, and then hopefully he can begin rehabbing and start throwing and go through that long-winded process of beginning to throw, getting out on the field, long tossing, throwing a flat ground, getting in the bullpen, throwing to live batters, and then finally going on a rehab assignment and eventually joining the team, hopefully by the time the All-Star break concludes. So definitely not the best news for Megill, but again, he's thinking on the positive front because it is an elbow injury, and he really did luck out because those can get pretty nasty. This is what Megill was feeling and why he ended up hitting the injured list. According to Giacomo, he says, quote, "During his last start Sunday against the Rays, Megill said he experienced, quote, some pulling in his right elbow, mostly on off-speed pitches. He hit 2 batters in the outing, both on sliders, and he spiked another pitch in front of home plate. As he fought through the elbow discomfort," Megill added, "he had no idea where his sliders were going. But Megill's MRI results eased his mind that this is the type of injury that could linger. The initial plan is for Megill to rest 7 to 10 days. If he is symptom-free at that time, he'll begin ramping up again. If not, he'll rest for longer." So definitely an unfortunate thing for Megill to go down, as with the Kodai Senga injury, with Manaea and Montas not ready yet, the Mets are really thin on their starting pitching. And in fact, they had no starting pitcher for tonight, but we'll get to that in just a little bit because they actually do, as they have made a decision for later tonight. But Let's go over the two middle transactions in between. The Mets sent third baseman Mark Vientos on a rehab assignment to Syracuse Mets, and the Mets sent left-handed pitcher Brooks Raley on a rehab assignment to the Port St. Lucie Mets, that being the low A affiliate, and of course Syracuse being the triple A affiliate. Now the experts have more to say about this. They're going to talk about these two players, starting with Matt Mongan of Metsmerized. He says, quote, after injuring his hamstring while running out of the box against the Dodgers on June 2nd, Mark Vientos returned to action on Tuesday as the starting DH for the Syracuse Mets. Here's a quick update on a big prospect, the number one in our system. Jet Williams continued his scorching start to the summer, raising his season OPS to 944. And now to Raley. Brooks Raley tossed a scoreless inning for the St. Lucie Mets in his return. So that's all good news. Raley was used as an opener. He pitched a clean inning, a scoreless inning, giving up one hit and striking out two. Mark Vientos, unfortunately, didn't find much success in AAA. He went 0 for 4 with 2 strikeouts. Neither him nor Raley have played since, as Raley is likely still on some rest. Hopefully, he'll pitch in the next couple of days out of the bullpen or maybe as a starter. And Mark Vientos hopefully will get back in that Syracuse lineup sooner rather than later. Now, let's go back to more injury news after we go to a little bit of positives there on the rehab assignments of Raley and Vientos, both two critical players down the stretch for the Mets. Hopefully, as Raley could be that lefty that the Mets really need in that bullpen, and of course, Vientos should be that starting third baseman, maybe the DH, as we haven't seen great defense from him this season. We'll go up to the moves on the 19th. The Mets optioned Ty Adcock to AAA Syracuse, and unfortunately, the Mets had to place Max Kranick also on the 15-day injured list. This is retroactive to the 16th of June with also a right elbow sprain. So let's go over to the experts. What are they saying about Max Kranick? Well, Mike Puma of the New York Post is going to talk to you about Kranick. He says, quote, the reliever was placed on the injured list Thursday with a strain in the elbow and returned to New York for an MRI exam. Kranick had soreness, according to manager Carlos Mendoza, following his Sunday appearance, but the team gave him extra time to see if he would recover, and unfortunately, as we can tell from him hitting the injured list, he did not recover well enough. Now, the skip, Carlos Mendoza, believes this is actually a very similar injury to Tylor Megill. He says, quote, it's very similar to what Megill experienced on the secondary pitches. Remember what we heard earlier from Anthony DiComo, how on that secondary pitch, like the slider, Megill just felt off. He didn't really know where it was going. He couldn't control it. And again, that's because of the strain. That's because of the inflammation. So, what were the transpiring results? What happened as a result? You see it with the third and fourth lines down. The New York Mets recalled right-handed pitcher Justin Hagenman from Syracuse, and the Mets recalled right-handed pitcher Dedniel Nunez from Syracuse as well. So hopefully Nunez can refine that Dedniel Nunez that we had back in 2024. I mean, look at those statistics. 2-0 with a 2.31 ERA in 35 innings. He was great. He was really that eighth inning guy last year. But as you can see below that in 2025, he had a really rough start to the year in his first 5 games, only firing 3 2/3 innings pitched. So let's hope that after Nunez spent a long time in AAA trying to regain his pitches, trying to regain himself, he can finally overcome that injury that he had to begin the 2025 season and throughout the 2024 offseason, and he can regain that 2024 Dedniel Nunez that we all knew and loved, especially because that bullpen really needs him right about now. Let's go over to Justin Hagenman now. These are his statistics, and if you think it's a little interesting that he has 2 games played, it is, because formerly he only came up for 1 game. We'll get to that in just a little bit. As we'll hear from Mike Puma once again, he says, quote, Mets are planning to bring up Justin Hagenman to pitch tomorrow in Philadelphia. Possible he will be utilized behind an opener. Well, this was posted before the end of last night's game, and unfortunately for the Mets, unfortunately for Hagenman really, in terms of starting, he was used last night. He threw 39 pitches last night, went 2 2/3, gave up 2 hits, no earned runs, and 1 strikeout. So definitely a great outing from Justin Hagenman. He probably won't be available in the bullpen tonight, and obviously cannot be used as the opener. So here are the probables for tonight. And yes, Blade Tidwell is back. He will be making his second start, and let's go ahead and hear from the experts on why the Mets ended up going with Blade Tidwell. We'll hear from John Flanagan of SNY as he says, quote, New York originally expected to have Justin Hageman either start or work as a bulk reliever in a bullpen game, but he ended up throwing the final 2 2/3 innings during Thursday night's series finale against the Braves. Instead, they'll turn to young right-hander Blade Tidwell. Carlos Mendoza indicated post-game Thursday that the team was planning on utilizing a traditional starter due to the recent heavy bullpen usage, and Tidwell was among the arms in the mix. Keep in mind, the Mets have played a lot of baseball lately. They haven't had a lot of off days, so that bullpen has definitely been worked. To continue with the quote, Flanagan says, quote, fellow prospect Nolan McLean was a potential option as well, but Tidwell was a better fit at the moment since he is currently on the 40-man roster, and the Mets are only looking for a spot starter. Now, we'll hear a little bit later why the Mets are only going with a spot starter to have this Megill spot fixed. We'll hear that a little bit later. But because that is only a spot start, Tidwell was the better option. That way you don't have to DFA Tidwell. You already have him on the 40-man roster. Just bring him up, tell him to make one start. Hopefully he does well, and then he goes back down to AAA. McLean, as the number 5 prospect in the Mets system, can continue to develop down there in AAA with the Syracuse Mets. So let's take a look. How has he done? How has Blade Tidwell done? Well, we'll hear from Flanagan again, and it's not so hot. He says, quote, now the 23-year-old will make his second big league outing to open a massive 3-game set against the Phillies. Tidwell made his debut with the club earlier this season, allowing 6 runs on 9 hits while walking 3 over just 3 2/3 innings in a loss to the St. Louis Cardinals. He was roughed up during his last outing down in Syracuse, but had put together a strong stretch prior to that, allowing 3 or less earned runs over each of his last 5 starts. Now, go ahead and check out my Blade Tidwell video from a while ago, back when they called him up originally, if you want to hear more about this prospect, but it is good, that last sentence saying that he's allowed 3 or less earned runs in each of the last 5 starts prior to being roughed up in his last outing down there in Syracuse, and the Mets really need him to do well, because as I said earlier, this series is absolutely vital. And not only that, but the Mets have to face this guy, former Met Zach Wheeler, who's 7-2 with a 2.76 ERA and a whip well less than 1. Also 110 strikeouts. Wheeler has just been phenomenal. Definitely a Cy Young candidate as well over there in Philly. Massive game tonight on Apple TV. One more piece of news for the injured list as we'll go over to another tweet, this time from DeComo. He says, quote, the Mets are now at least considering an IL stint for Brett Baty, who's been dealing with a groin injury, who was unavailable tonight for the second straight game, that being last night's game on Thursday. Baty is making progress, but slower than the Mets had hoped. They'll most likely make a decision tomorrow, as in today. So 2 potential moves that we'll see today. We're definitely going to see Blade Tidwell called up to the big league roster because he has to start tonight, and obviously he has to be on the MLB roster to do that. And we might hear something about Brett Baty going to the 10-day IL. That would definitely be retroactive to 3 days ago now, so hopefully he would come back sooner rather than later. But remember, if he goes to the IL, even if it's the day-to-day IL or the 10-day IL, which is relatively small and short, he has to make a rehab appearance in some way, shape, or form. So hopefully he can just work this injury off, and maybe by the end of this series, if not by Monday, Baty will be back. Now, one more piece of news to go over, and that is that Frankie Montas will be joining the big league club. That's why I said this is only a spot start for Blade Tidwell. After this cycle in the rotation, next time I believe it would be Megill's spot comes up, it will be Frankie Montas taking the mound. So the Mets get one guy back finally on that starting pitching front, and the foreseeable rotation until either Senga, Manaea, or Megill comes back will be David Peterson, Griffin Canning, Clay Holmes, Frankie Montas, and Paul Blackburn. Hopefully the Mets can get a little bit more healthy with this starting pitching. And again, a critical series starting tonight against the Philadelphia Phillies. So let's go Mets. They got to start winning some games, keep this division lead. A lot of injury updates. We went over every single one of them. That is all that we got on the roster and on some injury updates for now. Manaea continues to rehab down there. Raley and Vientos as well. So some good news on the horizon. There's light at the end of the tunnel, but right now the Mets really have to bear down here against the tied for division lead Philadelphia Phillies. As always, thank you so much for watching. Go down in the comments, let me know. What do you think about all these injuries? I mean, It's the Mets. We're always going to be injured, it seems like. But do you think that they can break free of this 6-game losing streak? Do you think they can have a good series here against the Phillies and regain that division lead? Let me know down in the comments. Unfortunately, that's all the time I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching as always, and let's go Mets.